Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to VG Myths, the online internet video game TV show taking 0 steps forward and 2 steps up. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is the long-awaited sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog 3, featuring even more momentum platforming action aided by the age-old momentum-gaining strategy of holding right to win. But what if you're terrible at winning? Can you beat Sonic the Hedgehog 2 without pressing right or left? The rules are simple. We must beat the game from start to finish without ever giving a right or left directional input. This is only vaguely theoretically feasible with the roughest of the rest of them, Knuckles, thanks to his abilities to glide through the air, climb up and down walls, and very importantly, reverse direction by jumping off walls. He'll be our player character of choice. And for obvious reasons, cheat codes and save states are banned. With the rules set, we're nowhere close to getting this run started. Cause I don't know if you know this, it's kind of a well-kept secret, but in order to play video games, it's incredibly important to actually have a video game. Let's head back through the time vortex to September of 2018, when I sucked and failed at the Sonic 3 No Right run. We did that run on what at the time was the most easily accessible version of the game, Sonic 3 and Knuckles on the Sega Mega Drive and Genesis Classics collection on PC. Being on PC, custom button remapping was incredibly easy, allowing me to remove left and right from my controller's D-pad entirely. The moment that run was over, I naturally looked into doing the same thing in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, but alas, Sega Mega Drive and Genesis Classics include Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and only Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Knuckles is only playable in a special Knuckles the Echidna in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 variant, originally by locking on a Sonic 2 cart to a Sonic & Knuckles cart. While vanilla Sonic 2 has been thrown around on basically every platform at some point, this version of the game has gotten comparatively few official releases. In 2018, the 2 most accessible Sonic 2 and Knuckles releases were via Sonic Mega Collection from several console generations prior and the Xbox Live Arcade, both of which I owned. Sadly, these 2 versions are non-viable for this challenge. The controller options of both releases only allow the remapping of buttons and not directional input. Without the ability to unmap left and right, the D-pads and control sticks of these controllers would make accidental diagonal inputs too easy, putting the entire run at risk every time you need to press up or down, which is often. Of course, I could have gotten around this easily by sailing the 7 seas, but for VG Myths, I try to do every run on an official release of the game on official hardware. With a Sonic 2 and Knuckles run non-viable, I bided my time. Surely one day Sonic 2 and Knuckles would see the light of day again on a modern platform with an options menu that trusts me enough to make the game unplayable. And, as you're probably already aware, on June 22nd, 2022, Sonic Origins with Knuckles playable in Sonic 2 was released on all modern platforms, including PC. We can't use it! Sure, there's an actual genuine options menu, which features some of the best remapping options in the industry, which is impressive considering these games are played with 1 button, but there's another problem. Sonic Origins versions of these games are all remakes rather than emulations or ports of the originals. The nitty-gritty physics and gameplay of these games isn't exactly one-to-one, including one very, very particularly important detail. On the original Genesis and Mega Drive versions of both Sonic 2 and Sonic 3, if you glide into the left edge of the screen, Knuckles will automatically reverse direction. By the time of Sonic Origins, however, the unsung hero programmer of Sonic Team had apparently been fired for wasting company time on the most inconsequential mechanics, so Knuckles will be stuck staring at the edge of the screen. The automatic reversal is too useful a mechanic to leave behind, so Sonic Origins is non-viable for this challenge. But Sonic Origins did inspire me to stop being lazy for one fraction of an instant and finally realize I could have done this run 2 years ago. In February 2020, Sega Ages Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was released for the Nintendo Switch, emulating both Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Knuckles the Echidna in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. While many releases of the 4 games in Sonic Origins were scrubbed from sale in an attempt to make you forget they'd been available far cheaper for years, Sega Ages Sonic 2 was spared. At the time of the Sega Ages release, this run would have been viable thanks to the Switch Joy-Cons featuring a segmented D-pad. Each direction on the D-pad is a 100% separate button internally, making accidental horizontal input only possible by literally pressing the wrong button. And shortly after the Sega Ages release, the run became even viabler with a Switch system update allowing for controller customization. Simply swap left and right to the unused shoulder buttons and you've got a D-pad incapable of horizontal input. Plus, I didn't actually realize it at the time I did the run, but you can also go the extra mile by remapping the left analog stick to the right analog stick, at which point you could chuck your controller out the window and the run would be 100% safe. Anybody outside the window, not so much. That said, now that we're ready to get into the run, I should probably warn you that chucking your controller out the window is a realistic risk. Say hello once again to Knuckles' insufferable best friend, the Spring. Without horizontal input, there's absolutely nothing you can do here. It is impossible to escape these springs. At least, not by doing something. The only way to continue the game is to sip a latte until the stage timer counts 1 second after 9:59, at which point Knuckles will die of old age and revive back at your most recent checkpoint. It's tempting to call these moments soft locks, but they're not technically true soft locks since you'll be able to keep playing eventually. For the sake of accuracy, we'll instead be calling them latte locks. Now, you might be thinking, Gamer Champ, why sip a latte? Wouldn't it be faster to just reset the game and reload your save? Yeah, about that. There's a very good reason I'm not using save files. They don't exist. Save files weren't invented until Sonic the Hedgehog 3. If you reset the game, you're choosing to go all the way back to Emerald Hill Zone. And to make the situation even worse, not only had save files not been invented yet, infinite lives hadn't either. Knuckles begins the game with only 3 lives. You can collect more as you play, but obviously our ability to collect lives is going to be severely limited. Lose them all and your game is over. This run is far more hardcore than Sonic 3 and Knuckles, with the constant impending risk of an end to the entire run. If you get latte locked, you're just gonna have to bounce around patiently until timeout. Sonic 2 and Knuckles does have one huge benefit over Sonic 3 though. Level design is overall a lot simpler, with many levels just being a straight shot to the goal. Even so, I recommend you look up a map for every level and follow a path least likely to end in a latte lock. The first boss fight is pathetic. For all boss fights going forward, you'll also be happy to know Sonic 2 and Knuckles patched in a very useful feature that wasn't present in Vanilla Sonic 2. Your ring count is remembered at each checkpoint. When you die, you go back to that checkpoint with your ring count restored, so even if there are no rings after a boss checkpoint, you'll still be able to take a few hits. It's also worth noting, once the boss is dead, you need to be careful tiptoeing your way onto the capsule. Unlike the left edge of the screen, gliding into the right edge of the screen does not cause Knuckles to reverse. Have fun sipping that victory latte until your inevitable failure. Chemical Plant Act 1 is also mostly a straight shot if you keep to the upper paths, but don't rush for the goal quite so quickly. We're on a shopping trip for an infinite supply of Knuckles. Check out the map. Near the end of the level, at the top, are 3 extra life monitors in a row.
Cough, cough, cough. They're really dumb extra life monitors. Really dumb and stupid, and only a dumb, stupid idiot would ever think to even go after those extra life monitors. Really, absolutely stupid kind of idiot, really. Like the kind of idiot that would spend an hour just going after those over and over, like using an exploit at a friggin' checkpoint. Don't do that. That'd be really stupid. So you can actually just like go into this spike pit, and like, so what you do is you wait until you're about to drown, and then when you're about to drown, also you only have 1 life, and then you jump in, and then you drown during your taking damage animation, and for whatever reason, that makes you lose a life from drowning, but then also lose an extra life from falling off the bottom of the screen. So you get a game over because you hit 0 lives, but then also you lose a life after 0 lives, which puts you at lowercase y5 lives, which is a really big number of lives, and so then the game is just like, oh, you actually got a lot of lives. Never mind on that game over. Yeah, keep going. Just like the only thing is, you probably die a lot. Probably die a lot, because if you get extra lives, then you'll be back at 0 lives, which is fine. Being at 0 lives is fine, because then if you die, you just go down to lowercase 5y lives again. Lowercase y5, but if you go up to 1 life, then you're gonna go down to 0 lives when you die, and you don't want to die and have 0 lives. It's okay to live with 0 lives. Just don't die to 0 lives, and you're good. You can do this in Chemical Plant Act 2, which is like super not even a big deal to get to. It is the 4th level, so just do this.
Don't worry, there are no more lengthy detours. From here on, we're just trying to beat the game 1 level at a time. In Chemical Plant Act 2, we'll have to get smart with our pathfinding. The walls reach all the way up to the top of the screen. If you just follow the level's main paths, they'll all eventually lead you into vacuum tubes, ending in a latte lock. But if you're at all familiar with Sonic 2 speedrunning, or just efficient casual play, this is a total non-issue. Look at this area on the level map. If you enter this area from the long slope at the beginning of the level, then Knuckles will treat the horizontal piping ahead as a solid object. But later in the level, you're expected to return, passing through this gate, which only opens from the left side. Moving through this path hits a trigger that makes the horizontal pipe intangible, allowing Knuckles to instead travel down the lower path leading to the rest of the level. The wall just to the left of that gate is actually itself intangible, so simply glide on in and pass through the gate. The rest of the level has no vacuum tubes to worry about. With our
several minutes
plus chemical plant visit over, we can finally move on to Aquatic Ruin Zone. In Act 1, keep along the top path, which is almost entirely a straight shot with absolutely no hazards. In Act 1, keep along the top path, which is almost entirely a straight shot, save for this pillar, which will rise up and latte lock you on approach. Preemptively jump on the log immediately prior for enough height to reliably clear it. In Act 2, the top path is now non-viable. There are multiple rising pillars in the way, and while you can technically clear them, the time risked by a latte lock isn't worth it. Instead, try to stay on the bottom path, which is technically more dangerous, but only in ways that kill you instantly rather than agonizingly. Though I will note that when I actually got into the run proper, I ended up on the middle path by complete accident and bounced around wildly with no idea where I was going. That strategy is not recommended. The boss fight might look like trouble with a newcomer's eye. However, a little piece of trivia from the Sonic 3 run still applies. If Knuckles lands on the very edge of a platform and does his ledge leaning animation, he will, for whatever reason, turn himself to face the direction he's leaning. Using this, you can get yourself on top of the left totem, at which point you can spam spin dashes, which conveniently bounce you back. With Eggman's hammer bonked, move on to Casino Night Zone.
No!
Keep a map by your side throughout the entirety of Casino Night. There are latte lock traps around every corner. I ended up taking the bottom path. The top and middle paths both carry the risk of falling into this pinball launcher pit, which shoots straight into the air and thus causes a latte lock. The bottom path, while littered with latte locks, is at least slightly easier to weave through. Soon you'll reach Bumper Hell, with a cubby offering free lattes if you're stupid enough to fail the dice roll. But I figured out a trick to it. The bumpers aren't capable of canceling Knuckles' glide, they just bounce him up or down depending on the angle. wall. That means even if you're unlucky enough to glide into that death cubby, you'll just grab onto the wall and can jump out safely. If you clear the cubby and hit the upper wall, you can make a gliding drop onto the blocks and In Act 2, there are some springs to avoid on the bottom path, so I instead took the middle path. There are a couple springs to look out for in the pits below, but eventually you'll bounce into the boss fight. This is thankfully the easiest fight in the game since it's enclosed in an arena with climbable walls on both sides, and was very much not designed with Knuckles in mind. Next up, Hilltop Zone. Act 1 is the most linear level seen in the game yet, with almost nothing that could really be called a split path. Make sure you keep along ground level until you reach this loop-de-loop. If you glide above it, you'll encounter a wall which cannot be climbed on, thus latteing you. Follow the lower path and you'll eventually reach an unavoidable set piece I'm pretty sure a decently sized fraction of you have been waiting for, possibly the most infamous roadblock in the run. There's a spring right next to the wall, which, if walked over, results in a latte lock. Unlike most other instances, we can't just climb the wall. There's a hidden hallway we'll climb up into, which only features a sideways spring at its dead end. As I'm sure you're already aware, this run has been theory crafted in the past, and people have found multiple different solutions to this puzzle. Some said to make a seemingly pixel-perfect landing on the edge of the cubby. Doing so properly causes the ceiling to push you to the left. Problem is, this comes with a 10-minute penalty on failure, so while it's totally doable if you're doing a segmented run and can freely reset or load a save state, it's completely non-viable in a full run of the game. Others said to make a properly timed glide onto the spring, carrying you through the upper passage with your momentum. This also comes with a 10-minute penalty on failure. Thankfully, I managed to find my own strat. Climb into the cubby, hit the spring, and mash the jump button to start and end a glide immediately, halting your movement within the cubby. Now, perform a one-tap spin dash and try to jump right as you're reaching the exit. If you fail, there's little risk of a latte lock. You can quickly turn right back around using the far wall and try again. It will definitely take a few tries, but with a properly timed spin dash jump, you can just barely thread the needle and get past the upper left wall, which you can glide onto and escape from the pit. The rest of the act and most of Hilltop Act 2 feature no special roadblocks. The one sticking point is the boss fight. Make very certain you have rings when hitting the last checkpoint. There are none to be found after, and I don't want to imagine how hard this fight would be without them. A totally safe strat would be difficult to pull off, so I instead recommend trying your luck on abusing invulnerability frames to mash up Eggman in the lava. When he submerges, you can safely wait for him on the walls. Once he's beaten, you can climb out of Hilltop and drop straight back down into Mystic Cave Zone. Mystic Cave doesn't have all the pretty flashing lights of Casino Night, but make no mistake, it's a rival in latte consumption. The lowerable bridges aren't legally walls and thus can't be climbed on. For most of the stage you can see these coming, but watch out near the end of Act 1. If you fail to resist the temptation and jump down for that shield monitor, you'll be locked behind an upcoming bridge. Also, pay special attention to the pulleys that activate the bridges. The game remembers whether Knuckles grabbed them while jumping or while grounded. If while jumping, Knuckles is allowed to glide, no problem. But if while grounded, Knuckles will be permanently stuck on the pulley, holding onto it with one hand while sipping a latte with the other. In Act 2, I kept along the bottom path, mostly since that's the simplest. When you reach these sliding boxes, jump into the middle. It looks like a major crushing hazard, but Knuckles will miraculously be spat out the bottom. When the bottom path forces you to turn around, dive into the first pit rather than gliding across. Continuing past this spring wall would have put you at risk of running into the backside of a bridge. From here you'll reach Eggman without incident, who can be very easily cheesed with your invulnerability frames. Oil Ocean Zone is a nice change of pace. If you just keep following the natural path forward, you should never encounter any trouble and won't need to consult a map. Casually propel yourself to the end of both acts for the fight against Eggman. Just before reaching the fight, however, there's an invincibility monitor to find. Turn yourself around on the little ledge ahead, grab the monitor, about face on the oil slide, and run into the boss fight ASAP. This will let you get him most of the way dead without any risk. To finish him off, hug one of the side walls and wait for him to resurface. He's completely incapable of attacking you down here. We're now nearing the end game with Metropolis Zone. Paths get really difficult to follow based on the map since the level loops vertically, but when it comes to actually playing, there's still generally a top, middle, and bottom path. In Act 1, I recommend keeping up top, but be warned that you can latte lock if you drop into the middle path at the wrong time. Other than that, there shouldn't be anything to watch out for. Blindly glide forward through Acts 1, 2, and 3 to reach the boss fight with Eggman, who requires almost no horizontal movement even in a casual playthrough. Sky Chase Zone is a dev-intended auto-scroller freebie, so the next real level is Wing Fortress Zone. Wing Fortress at first seemed absolutely literally impossible until I stumbled upon knowledge that is gonna blow your friggin' mind. You know those rocket jets? They're just background decorations. They don't actually hurt you. I am 99% certain that I am the first human being in history to discover this fact, because I refuse to believe otherwise. Less obscure is the cheese trick to skip most of the level, which is even easier with Knuckles than with Sonic or Tails, D-pad or not. Dive face first into this fan near the beginning, invulnerability frame through it, and bam, you're now halfway through the level. Get a low glide from the falling platforms to avoid an upper air gust and skip the next platforming section, then continue through the mostly uneventful remainder of the level. Just one note, this cubby is a tight squeeze for Knuckles, so tight that he's not legally allowed to jump once inside. If you can't jump, you can't glide. You can only... Along the way, I highly recommend obtaining almost 100 rings before touching the final checkpoint. I didn't manage it myself, but it would ensure you won't have to lose any lives during the Wing Fortress boss. It's fought within 2 laser walls which can't be climbed on, thus making it impossible to turn around once you've moved too far. Enter the battle with as little distance as possible. If done right, you can leave 1 or 2 rings on the ground as insurance. Juggle yourself on the platforms as they fly by while jumping into the boss above. You won't have enough time to kill it in one cycle, but with your invulnerability frames and some properly timed jumps, you can get it in 2 or 3. It probably looks really confusing, but don't worry, the floating platforms have a habit of catching you. Just focus on hurting the laser. Once the laser is dead, steal Eggman's secret Knuckles and jump down to officially enter the true final battle in Death Egg Zone. All that lives grinding we did back an hour ago was almost entirely to prepare for the Death Egg, in which there are exactly 0 rings. You'll need to defeat 2 bosses in a row without getting hit once. The first is the silver robot guy who looks like Sonic, whom we're giving an overly long name both as a matter of tradition but also to poke subtle fun at the multitude of ambiguously named metallic hedgehogs. He always follows the same attack pattern, so get enough hits on him fast enough and you can take him out the same way every time. Time for the double final boss, Death Egg Robot. We have to hit him 12 times rather than the usual 8, and it is absolutely impossible to turn around. If you reach the right edge of the screen, you're dead. His openings for attack are small in a normal Knuckles playthrough and microscopic without horizontal input, and every piece of him that isn't a damageable hitbox is an instant death hitbox, sending us to the beginning of Death Egg Zone. But with Eggman approaching fast, you'll have to throw caution out the airlock and jump into him without fear at every opportunity. Spin dash jump into his underside as soon as he reaches ground level and before he starts moving. You'll be launched backwards. Jump and glide to position yourself at a mid-distance and get ready to spin dash back into his underside right at the moment when both his arms are passing by the middle of his body. The hitboxes are super wonky and unintuitive, so you'll need to aim a bit lower than I personally think looks safe. Do this perfectly and you'll hit him 4 times before he stops moving. At that point, get ready again. Just as he's about to become fully centered, spin dash into his underside twice in a row. Note that after landing, Knuckles has a wind down time before he's allowed to crouch and spin dash, so the timing on that 6th hit is trickier than it appears. On that 6th hit, allow yourself to be propelled backward into the edge of the screen. Eggman will try to drop on top of you. Wait for him to lock on, then glide forward just a little bit. When he lands, jump into him twice and quickly make your escape with the tiniest baby step possible, jumping over both arms right before they're fired. Since Eggman always locks onto us when falling, we're edging closer and closer to the right edge of the screen to get away from him. You're gonna lose a lot of lives undershooting your mark here, but overshooting your mark is just as deadly. On this first escape, you want to aim Knuckles so his sprite is fully contained within the background window. On the second lock-on, get 2 more hits in as Eggman lands and proceed forward. This is gonna be a huge baby step, since Eggman is now walking forward towards us. Keep in mind that there's a little bit of room where Knuckles' sprite can overlap with Death Egg Robot's boot without actually touching its hitbox. Every pixel counts, so you're gonna want that overlap to happen. With Death Egg Robot now at 2 HP and victory within reach, it's time for the absolute hardest trick in the entire friggin' run. When Eggman lands, he'll be facing the left and lunge forward. This drops his jetpack down and forward, whose flame has a damaging hitbox that will hit us if we're still standing close. And on top of that, he fires some bombs behind that will hit us if we're standing too far. But just to the left of his jetpack is Eggman's barely accessible egg butt. We can hit this as he falls, but then we have to dodge the approaching jetpack. To do this, as you're falling from the previous attack, just barely tap the glide button. This is an incredibly precise timing window, both on the initial jump and the glide. So precise, I can't even do it by sight. I just press the button like I think I'm supposed to and hope the screen reflects what I'm envisioning. If done exactly correctly, you'll be far enough to the right to dodge the jetpack, and far enough to the left that the first set of bombs won't touch you. The second set of bombs, though, absolutely will. Just as Death Egg Robot leans forward to fire that second set, jump in the air and glide forward, again with the smallest possible baby step in the hopes you just barely scrape past the bomb's hitboxes. If you sufficiently min-maxed all prior baby steps, when Eggman locks on for a 4th time, you'll have just barely enough space to edge past his feet. For this final jump, the timing doesn't need to be as precise, since all his hitboxes disappear the moment his HP reaches 0. With Knuckles getting his revenge against Eggman for crashing the Death Egg onto Angel Island by dropping the Death Egg out of orbit, the Sonic 2 and Knuckles hold right to lose run is mission complete. In retrospect, this just might be the most uniquely sadistic VG Myths run ever. I heavily recommend it to all your friends, though please avoid if you're worried about your caffeine intake. Before heading out, shout out to YouTuber Billabob, who, as previously mentioned, made a video about the same challenge a few years back, which I definitely must know I did watch before doing the run myself, which probably shaved a couple hours I would have spent trying to figure out Death Egg Robot. And finally, special thanks to all Patreon backers including Anon42, RB Drock, Zolin Zero, Les Lamb, Chris Nate, Alexander Botkin, Anu Ikrira, Vincent Hall, Alex Nelson, Lively Leader, Jason Ilges, Rundum Goy, Vaith, Rory Kelly, Lane Robert Leishman, Liddy Kitty. Game Champ says trans rights are human rights. I am going to change this name soon, but I'll always support you, GC. Salty Sweet, Crustacean Greek, Hashtag EMT and Specialist Sandra Kozak, Queen Sapphire, Plum Sweater, Nikki Wiki 34, Yield Foreign, Nathaniel Kalita. I had COVID when I wrote this, so I couldn't think of a funny joke. I'll try harder next time. Multicore, Celestial Cookie. Evil Game Champ is like Bad Evening Nobody and Unwelcome Forward to WH Facts, the offline on-paper board game movie. Veravias, Curbs D50, Jorb, Damien R, Yop Alonzo, Cronus Anthem, Doro25, Britface. World Slowest Game of Chess. Whoops, sorry I didn't appear last video. I retaliate with the Holy en Passant EXF6. Star Captain Eli Shaba of Clan Ghost Bear, Wispy Syrup, Riley Anderson, Arcombs, Neptunian Baby. Slowest Game of Chess seems to be abandoned. That sucks. Oh well, anybody down for a game of Connect 4? What's that noise? Nova, Sinique says hashtag Landback, Zithuggle, Sandragon, Eric Barron, Zero, Mars Becker, XCY, IB Mackey, drawn by AJ, the one true AJ, Lynette Bowman. Now I only want to triumph. Hi, I'm Game Champ and I make my living off of reading funny names and playing video games incorrectly. Admiral Ampersand, Literal Cat, Sylvie Wing Cat Girl is gay and doesn't go to bed on time. Reblog if you too are gay and or don't go to bed on time. Eve Cable, Mackie B, Lily Farewell _ We Hardly Knew Ya Sap, Flip Chicken, Sound of Rain, Ryan Garvey, Milk Succubus, Grand Nero, Attempted Wholesomeness. There is no such thing as Sonic 2 and Knuckles Game of Champs, and there only exists Nakaruzu Kiruna in Soniku Hejihogutsu. Literally Judas Nora Ora. DNA analysis revealed that the direwolf is actually more closely related to African jackals than actual wolves. Beam Animates, the Jellybean Warlock, Sorio99, Jack Silverson, Dakota Riggs. Infamous Peace, the time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror. Trish Chandler, Airtide, 11, Maddie Sarenketo. If you're seeing this, then I forgot to change my Patreon name again before the latest video. How embarrassing would that be? Doodlesack 12, 12, Colin Monsma. Darknit, frequently a doofus, occasionally an idiot, always a fool. Idak, Carlo Calcaterra, Brisky, Margaret Josephine, Madrox07, Jen Duro. Robjection says there is no Easter Bunny, there is no Tooth Fairy, and there is no Walt Disney Studios. Eagle Weege, Awkward Silence, I Pompous. Many sentences within program were of a dangerous length and were performed by trained vocal practitioners. Don't try at home. Jen the pink-haired cat on twitter.com says meow. Friendly reminder that it's not normal to sneeze. I have never sneezed. F. Amadon. Release Idola LP4. T. Brunelli 200. Quiet Mischievous. Leverage. Lemon Planter. Knits a Gamer. Fluff System. The glorious return of I missed you, Miss Champ. Hey, is anyone missing an underscore? I found one under the rug. Ian Beck. Landfair Puilganid Gogari Chulishurunjuro Bulilian Sicilio Gogogoch. Kirkev Biohazard. Rekindled by the heat death of the universe. Grotchus. Frilly Lily. And Suverna. Sylveon underscore superstar. Hashtag 2290. Cutie Monica. Nemea Corporate Enchantress. Tech Gek. That hippie gamer. BJ Mashed Potato is making Game Champ read more and is very sorry. Cody Merchant. Biggest Dickus. Fiona Penny Perry. Rouge Hades Venus Judas Parker Lennox. Chris Koosland. Charles Surratt. There is only one gender. It's mine and you cannot have it. 11 Atrium is not to be asked about Smash Bros. They will not shut up for hours once they start ranting. Kaiser. Cal's one-handed egg cracking technique. Moomin Biscuit. Trans rights are human rights. The Beard Phantom. Everyone's favorite trans dragon girl. Aurelia. Omgong. My name is finally in a Game Champ video. Does this count as a haha funny meme name? Notice me, senpai. Kirito9979. STL of the Wild. Programmed on non-Euclidean duct tape for maximum minimalism. Weishi Linden. Bunno Wild. Ken of Red Lions. AI The Somnium Files is an action puzzle visual novel made by Spike Chunsoft and is better than Danganronpa. The non-binary Eldritch Functional QA tester Igniology. Basic M. Gamepla 4. Seltzer Fountain Man Madison. Aussie oi oi oi. Touchtone Banana Phone. Zeta is pretty and is absolutely valid and she will rise above her traumatic past. Getsugaru. Love Story Gaming TTV. I'm shy but not like Shy. My name's Cheyenne but I go by Shy. Krebins 12. Twinbee the Tailmeister. Complacent Moon. Amity Witch Among Humans says watch the Owl House, it's very cool and based. Duna Thomas Dynamaton. Scary Dinosaur Andrew Kinney. Lex wants Game Champ to say go watch the Owl House, 210 show of all time. It's goated, it's gnarly, watch it, so she spends. Stop simping for anime characters. Grace Simi. Ethan Vanellian. I'm Game Champ and my favorite movies are The Boss Baby and The Boss Baby Family Business. They are the best movies ever made. I became a patron so I could have a simple name that Game Champ can pronounce easily at the end of the videos, and that name is Woe. Tyler Beauregard, Mr. One-Up Machine, Flame Solus. Macaroni Cat is supporting Game Champ with the hope that one day the Patreon credits will be longer than the video's actual topic. Tender Tyler 88 supports shoveling money directly into Champ's face. Do it for her. Alexander Merrill, Morgan Autry, Lock Robin, Okitan, Common CJ, Bugberry Cloth, Chuniflo. The Fitness Gram Tempacer test is a multi-stage aerobic capacity test that progressively gets more difficult as it continues. Galactic Bonesman. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princess to act, and monarchs too. Anna M. Smeeb. Woolly, but every time someone gets their pronouns wrong, they add another O and E. Moonin. Gay people rule. No more memes. Jen. Hi, Grace Simi. Black, white, green, or blue. Show off your natural hue. Flamingo. Oh. If you're multicolored, that's cool too. A German meanie wants you to pronounce Rinfleisch, Teddy Rung, Uber, Washung, Southgaben, Uber, Targung, Gazettes. It's just red. Emily Nelson. Celica. I just want to hear Game Champ say games are dumb, so play dumb games. Again. We may be pirates, but we're not barbarians. We'll let them keep the toilet paper. Overly long name. Daybreak, non-binary shifter in Auroran Goddess, says trans rights are human rights. Symphony Smith. The Haunted. As you all know, for reasons of security, my name is changed monthly. This month, you may call me Wardy Fingelblaster. Gaming Medic. Yeah! Carolyn. Judge Relib. Derek Hunter. Tempest 23. Eric Williams. Fallon Northrup. Ray. Troy Johnson. Robin with a Y. Zeno. Always Dregel. Olwen Klein. Sonic Kurosaki. Witchcrafter Asagi. The One Free Skeleton. Critical Hit. Stormage. Lissa Poppy. Toast 90. Ray Danger. Harry Stovall. TV Rockwell. Das Springy has arrived. Bask in his radiance. Moonage Dream. Raphael Burgos. Ben Peters. Kelzini. Nicole the Gamer Girl and Gamer Girl Queen Kenda. Zissa Forf and Just King. Let me know how much this video sucks and how to improve in the comments below. Your favorite flavor of latte for watching, and get out of my house.